Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here, looking at Hitoshi Ariga's Megaman Gigamix Volume 2. The TLDR of Gigamix is, this series is a continuation of Megaman Megamix, a collection of comics originally done to kind of like advertise old Mega Man games on the SNES and PlayStation. And then after a 10-year hiatus, Hitoshi Ariga had nearly completed comics that Capcom wouldn't let him publish. And some of his notes imply that he and the fans had to push behind the scenes a little bit to finally persuade Capcom to let him come back to the series and complete his story. And it's one of the best examples I've seen of an independent creator, writer, artist, respecting what a franchise is while also adding his unique charm and creative ideas to it. So it's a really neat series from that angle, and also fun even if you're just like a casual fan of Mega Man. I have not played all these games. He does a really good job of kind of like helping the casual fan come along for the ride and making lots of nods to like the scores and scores of Mega Man robots that exist. And so I'll actually talk about that because it's kind of neat from a writing perspective too. So Volume 1 focused on one of the racing games, and so it was very silly, very tongue-in-cheek, comedic. Volume 2 takes a darker turn, and I'd almost describe it as an Akira Toriyama Dragon Ball Z style story with the Mega Man characters. So I marked this page because kind of interesting thing number one is he's mixing and matching from different games, sort of years after they're popular, right? Like when you think about it, a lot of these comics were made to advertise a game just as it was coming out. This is a combination of Mega Man 8 and Mega Man V. Not Mega Man 5, but Mega Man V, a Game Boy game I'd never heard of. There's Luna again. She will not leave us alone today. Well, she can just stay outside and meow. That's how we're going to solve this problem. So, Mega Man, I haven't played Mega Man V, but I have played Mega Man 8. So Mega Man 8 is a fun little Mega Man game with an implied story, but not too much happens in Mega Man 8. Duo basically is this cool robot from space who shows up. He seems like he's a strong guy and a good guy, and you earn his respect by beating Wily when he can't beat Wily, right? He's sort of similar. He sort of serves a similar role that Zero does in the Mega Man X games. So Ariga comes up with this really clever premise that Duo is a sort of ancient space robot who flies from planet to planet in the universe, absolutely eradicating all evil in the universe. So he arrives on Earth, and of course he's going to take out all of Wily's robots. So neat thing number one is using there are probably at least like 100 Mega Man robots at this point. Ariga knows how to use lots of them, but put emphasis on a few of them. So Duo shows up and he fights all of the robots from Mega Man 3 and Mega Man 7. And he even does cool things like he has the Mega Man 3 robots called the Thirds and the Mega Man 7 robots called the Sevenths, right? Like he's trying to like help make it easy for you if you can't keep track of all these robots, just to have like a basic placeholder for them. And even some of the goofy robots from the racing games, right? And Duo just completely starts decimating these robots. So what's neat about this plot-wise is no character this power has appeared in this series yet. It's basically just been Mega Man fighting other cool, fun, goofy cartoon robots, and suddenly like Frieza from Dragon Ball Z shows up, or Vegeta, and just starts wasting entire cities and everything. So it's a great hook for the stakes of the action increasing. It's also a neat challenge for Mega Man because he's used to fighting Dr. Wily, who's kind of a bad guy who wants to take over the world, but it's been established that Wily is somewhat of a he's like a bad boss, but he's a bad guy, but he's not a bad guy. Like he actually likes his robots, even though he's kind of a bit of a jerk. So Wily, although he's the bad guy, isn't really like a maniacal evil person, and Duo is going third-degree scorched earth tactics on eliminating Wily's robots. Now, here's an example of using just a couple characters very nicely. So, if all the other robots get their little moment in the sun, Ariga usually picks one or two robots from each game to emphasize and give a bit more personality to. He also does fun stuff where he sort of sees that different robots across different games might have an interesting relationship or an interesting parallel or contrast between one another. And he assumes that one robot is always the commander of their series. So Shadow Man has been introduced as a commander of one of the series of Wily robots, and Shade Man has been introduced as a commander. So they're like captains or sergeants or what have you. Now, both of them kind of have a shadow vibe going, right? But Shadow Man is a ninja and Shade Man is a vampire. So they're basically butting heads about what the proper way is to protect their master, because they actually have like a strong code of honor that leads them to want to protect Dr. Wily's life. So Shadow Man, because he's sort of like a very traditional ninja type guy, is very eager to throw his life away in service of his master. And Shade Man actually has to persuade Shadow Man that that's not the right thing to do. It's not enough for you to just die in a blaze of glory and then your master dies too. I'm actually going to ask you to live with shame if that's what it takes to protect our boss, because I'm the best person to create the distraction and you're the best person to sneak away with Dr. Wily. So there's lots of neat stuff about this. A, we're getting a sort of symbolic character distinction between Shade Man and Shadow Man. B, it's also based on observations Ariga is making about their character design. So Shadow Man the ninja, he's got to be more, Bushido and more about subterfuge. And Shade Man, the splendid-looking Dracula vampire guy, well, he's got to be a little bit more splendid and a bit more of a distracting guy. This is also helping to build up Duo as a really legitimate threat, because previously, out of all the robots Megaman's fought, guys like Shadow Man, Shade Man, and Quick Man have been presented as the strongest of Wily's robots, right? So when he has them make an epic entrance and face off with Duo, it makes them look cool because they're standing above, the crowd of scores and scores of robots, and it's making us realize just how serious Duo is as a threat, because he's knocking aside characters that were previously major threats in previous books. So the power scaling is increasing dramatically. This is kind of like the debate between Shade Man and Shadow Man. It's very well handled. It even gets to the point where it suggests that Shadow Man was considering committing seppuku. And it was handled well for a children's comic, right? But when he arrives at Dr. Light's, he's injured himself because of his shame and his feeling that he hasn't lived up to his sense of honor. And this gives us a great chance to kind of see Roll and Mega Man's good guy ethos or worldview, in contrast to Dr. Wily's robots, who aren't the worst guys, but how to put it, they want to take over the world. They just don't want anyone to get hurt when they take over the world. So Wily is rescued, and Mega Man decides to go out and face who's he fighting at this point? Yeah, they're still fighting Duo at this point. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. What is revealed is that Duo is actually just a force of light who is trying to contain like these evil space robots that are going to blow up every single person on Earth, right? So the space robots, these guys, are the bad guys from the Mega Man V Game Boy game. So these characters didn't interact in the same video game at any point. He's taking a bunch of characters from over here, he's taking a few characters from over here, and he's mixing them up into his own thing. So I marked this because this is just a good example of Roll as a character affirming the female virtues. So Dr. Light is a much more of a pacifistic kind of guy. He wanted to create robots who have souls. He wanted robots to help people, and he wants people to be nice to robots. He doesn't like when robots fight each other and get hurt. So he kind of has always had a problem with Mega Man going out and fighting for a living, even if he knows that Mega Man is fighting for justice and doing what's right. Originally, Mega Man Rock and his sister Roll were both domestic servant robots. They, cook and clean and do chores around the house, and only Rock got the updates to become a combat robot. Roll stayed as a domestic helper, and she's actually kind of struggled with this in previous stories, where she's felt like because she doesn't have the ability to do combat, it makes her feel less capable than Rock, and she's eager for an opportunity to kind of prove herself somehow. Well, she's really good. She's really good at cooking. She's really good at taking care of people. She's really good at racing. And and of being a emotionally supportive and a courageous person within her limitations, right? So it's really neat because as everybody's feeling hopeless and useless, Roll takes an opportunity to kind of like encourage them and urge them to go on in a desperate situation. Whereas Light is starting to feel defeated, and like all of his children basically are getting slaughtered one by one. When they're injured by an attack by the space robots, Light doesn't want to repair them because he thinks if he repairs them, they're just going to go off and fight the robots again and die for real this time. And then dramatically, who's offering to repair them? Dr. Wily. So the other kind of neat thing about Hitoshi Ariga is he really, really likes Dr. Wily, and he wanted Dr. Wily to almost kind of like combine two elements. On the one hand, Dr. Wily has served as a comedic, Dr. Robotnik, Wario kind of character where he has a big mustache and he wants to take over the world with a bunch of robots, right? So that there's a very funny, silly angle to that. He's also used Wily as a serious intellectual threat. Like he's capable of building robots. He understands AI, and there's some really, really intelligent stuff about AI in the series, by the way. So Wily and Light are the two, greatest robot builders on the planet. And Wily wants to take over the world, right? So obviously there's this good and evil vibe to them, but there actually starts to be a philosophical difference between the two of them, where Dr. Light's pacifism and his peace is making it hard for him to see his robots go out and fight and die against a serious threat. Wily wants them to be free to make that decision for themselves. So there's a way in which Dr. Light, because he's being a protective father, an overly protective father, is being inconsistent with his desire to let these robots act as if they have free will and act as if they have souls. That the central premise of the series is the robots have souls like human beings and they can make decisions. And Wily's making an argument that we have to let these kids grow up and choose for themselves what they're going to do with their lives. So after that little exchange, Megaman goes to fight the three big bad guys with Cutman and Lightman, who have kind of previously been established as two of Dr. Light's strongest fighting robots. So there's a nice little comedic moment because the bad guys are killing people and literally trying to eliminate all life on Earth. So pretty serious stakes, but this has always had the series has always had a lighthearted element to it. So Mega Man runs into the hourly pay squad part-timers who are Dr. Wily robots who work a part-time minimum wage job at an amusement park. And they've decided that because they care so much about protecting the customers, and technically speaking, all human beings on Earth are potentially customers, it's their job to protect all life on Earth as due to their commitment to excellent customer service. So again, he's taking but these are like 8 different robots from one of the games. They all have names like Stone Man or Gravity Man and Train Man and things like that. So he just finds a really fun way to use them where they become a collective, they sort of become a collective character and add a little charm and humor to a tense moment. Of course, the real bad guys show up and just start wasting everybody. There's some cool heroic transformations where some of the old Dr. Light robots from the first game get their moment to shine alongside Mega Man, but they're clearly completely outclassed. Then there's a really fascinating flashback to how Dr. Light and Dr. Wily met. And one of the most interesting things about the series for me is kind of like Astro Boy. It's asking the question about what if robots become the Pinocchio of a future generation, where Pinocchio is a little puppet that wants to be a real boy. What if we eventually build these robots that are so intelligent and so capable of making decisions that could we ever build a robot or build an AI that's functionally human being? When Dr. Light was young, he believed it would actually be important to give robots free will. People thought he was crazy. He was too ahead of his time. And Dr. Wily was one of the only people to see the importance of what Dr. Light was working on. So ironically, these two guys who are going to become enemies collaborate on a shared vision. And there's some really interesting stuff here. That's why we did it. We made it so that emotionless machines could feel for the very first time kindness and compassion, ideals and pride. But we knew these things only made half of a true soul. In order for them to understand joy, we had to give them sorrow. In order for them to truly laugh, we had to give them tears. In order for them to have courage, we had to give them despair. So the idea here is there's dimension to the human soul. There's dimension to human decision making. I think it's why like the original AI guys, like the first generation of AI, they had trouble teaching AI to do things like pick up blocks, because an AI could pick up a block, but it didn't necessarily understand what gravity was. There's this great video where the little robot hand picks up the block, it sets it at top, and then it lets go, and the block drops right down because it doesn't know what gravity is, so it just assumes if it puts the block there and lets go, the block will stay there, right? Basically, human beings know a lot of stuff intuitively, and we don't even know how we know it. Whereas if you try to make an AI do that, you have to teach it to do all kinds of things that you yourself never think of when you're stacking things like a baby, right? That's one of the fun, strange things about this field. So what I really like about this is Arika is completely committed to the idea of getting you to accept that these robots have human souls, and he's interested in kind of what that topic means, right? Like, what would it actually take for a robot to have a human soul? Well, it'd have to feel fear. It'd have to feel self-preservation. It'd have to feel emotions like despair. It's just a really neat little... what's neat is it's a very thoughtful little scene in the midst of a very cartoony, fighting robot Megaman book. But I think the importance of it is it's remembering that it's remembering what the key theme is that makes us look at the robots as human characters with human dramas. So the big reveal at the end is the crazy fighting space guy is revealed to be Duo. He's now, I guess, no longer insane or running around killing evil people everywhere. So it looks like the setup is now that Duo's got his mind back together, he may work with Megaman. Maybe there'll still be some tension between them, but the whole team is getting together to fight a more evil and dangerous threat than they've ever seen before. I have to highlight this. I didn't bookmark it for some reason, but Roll, who is not a combat robot, who can't like run around shooting guns, is still willing to die for Dr. Light. And what Dr. Light concludes is the robots are using their free will. I gave them this free will. Now they're choosing to do things that I didn't necessarily want them to do because I just wanted to protect them. But part of creating them to make their own decisions means that they're sometimes going to choose to do things that would hurt him as a sort of metaphorical father figure for these characters. Also just like more nice behind the scenes storytelling of Ariga thanking his fans, talking about how hard it was when you think about it, all these old comics were made to advertise old games, and this came out years and years after whatever Game Boy game or PlayStation 1 game were the inspiration for these. So it's really neat that he literally got to take his unfinished stories and unfinished art and find a way to bring it to the manga audience. And like Capcom's really supportive of him. There are like lots of little guest illustrations from Capcom artists with notes about how much they appreciate the series. What a great series. So this is definitely a good recommendation for a Mega Man fan, for an Astro Boy and Osamu Tezuka fan. I think you'd appreciate kind of like there's definitely awareness of Osamu Tezuka's thought and world, which makes sense because Mega Man is very strongly modeled after Astro Boy or the Mighty Atom. So Ariga is looking at like really neat manga in history for inspiration. Obviously, adding his own fun, cartoony, comedic vibe to it. In Volume 2 especially, adding a much stronger sense of danger and courage and the threat that they're actually going to die in this fight. So I'm really excited for Volume 3, and I'll be reviewing that next. With that, I'm a Marmaduke fan. This is a high recommendation. I love you guys. Catch you later.